Just extraordinary stuff here. Joining me now, the man himself, White House Senior Counselor for Trade and Manufacturing, Peter Navarro. Peter, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm so grateful that you landed on your Chanels and are able to talk about this now. Peter, what was your reaction to what you heard from Grassley yesterday? You wrote a whole op-ed about this, and the operation to surveil you and follow you was much bigger than you initially expected and you thought initially, right?
Yeah, it was quite a morning. 6 armed FBI agents come at me in a gangway. I wind up in handcuffs, leg irons, wondering why Comey didn't get the same treatment when he was indicted, but that's another story. But these documents that Chuck Grassley released yesterday show this much bigger operation. You had nearly a dozen FBI agents doing their Clouseau stuff. Navarro leaves his residence at 7:02 or whatever. And what's extraordinary about this is really the bigger picture here. Senator Chuck Grassley, almost single-handedly, is getting more and more documents that reveal this vast conspiracy. And I don't use that word very often, but it is. It's an 8-year-long conspiracy conducted at the top levels of leadership at the Washington field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where Comey and then Wray were part of this, but you had Clapper, Brennan, Page, Strzok, a whole cast of characters involved in this. And the reason why my case is important, Maria, besides its constitutional issues, it's still on appeal, is that the agent Walter Giardina, who's the one who put me in handcuffs, seems to be at the center of all of these operations that were designed either to overthrow the Trump government once the president was in or to stop him from winning elections. Walter Giardina, he was the guy who basically greenlit the Steele dossier as legitimate when we all know it was fake, as Comey and Giardina and all those others knew. That begat Crossfire Hurricane, the Mueller report, Crimson River, and then we got the Arctic Frost one, which was a big topic of conversation yesterday. And that was just a license to surveil and subpoena and get records and go into people's emails and phone records. And Republican senators were targeted by that. So here's the bottom line. If we don't hold them accountable, Maria, they will do it again. And they may start doing it again as early as 2026 if Democrats get back control of the House and subpoena power. That's what's at risk. And it was chilling to me sitting in the hearing yesterday morning and looking at the right side of the table there of senators who were all on the far left. And you had Dick Durbin having the chutzpah to say that it was us weaponizing the federal government. They put me in prison. They put Bannon in prison. They tried to put Donald Trump in prison for 700 years. They bankrupted Rudy Giuliani. They took away the bar cards of Jeff Clark and John Eastman. These people, they have no shame with their talking points. And then you go around the room. It's like I sat really close to Schiff. The slime was getting on my suit from that guy. That guy is the guy that belongs in prison for lying to Congress. So the big thing here, Maria, is accountability. It's time for investigations, subpoenas. Chuck Grassley's going to take us to that promised land. And Pam Bondi finally yesterday got some people appointed, confirmed by the Senate. There was 100 people that got confirmed yesterday, and one fell through. A lot of them were justice people. She's been shorthanded. But now's the time, Maria. We've got to accelerate this accountability, do the investigations, give people fair trials like I never got, memo to the courts. And hold them accountable. They'll do it again. That's the problem here.
Well, I mean, it's just extraordinary the levels that they stoop to shut down any dissent and really to shut down President Trump and his team, putting you in jail and surveilling all these people. I'm really stumped as to why Arctic Frost targeted the senators that they did when they were investigating Jack Smith, investigating January 6th. I mean, Lindsey Graham, Marsha Blackburn.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I almost can understand Ron Johnson. I mean, it's absolutely wrong. It's unconstitutional and it's criminal what they did to all of them, including Ron Johnson. But Ron Johnson was a needle in their side. He was investigating them. What was Marsha Blackburn doing? Right? Was this all because they were allies to Trump? And then look at the surveillance timeline that they had on you. Almost a dozen agents involved. I mean, you initially thought it was just a swarm of 5 agents ambushing you and your fiance at the airport. And you made a great point. You lived right next door to the FBI. They could have just knocked on your door, but they wanted to make the stage a whole theatric thing and a full-blown public arrest when you were at the airport.
The most stunning reveal in those documents, Maria, was there was a checkbox on the form that the whistleblower was released, and it said, "Is the subject armed or dangerous?" And the check was no. So there's absolutely no reason to take me down in the way they did. But those documents were hid in discovery in my actual court case, which is another example of how you simply can't get a fair trial. And with respect to why they're surveilling, I mean, you have to understand the culture of the FBI going back to Hoover. It's always to get dirt on congressmen so that they can bend the congressman to their will. I think that's what's going on. But this is all ultimately about getting Trump. I would be remiss here not to point out that people can read about all this in my book, I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to. I only mention it here because I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to is supposed to be a wake-up call for the American people. If they can do it to me or Bannon or Trump, they can do it to everyone watching this program now. And what I saw yesterday is they will do it. I'm telling you, these people, from Mondami to Schiff and everybody in between, they will use political power to have their way with you, and that way is not the American way, and that's the problem here.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible, Peter. I'd like to see whether or not we actually do see more charges on Jim Comey and others who he worked with, and those charges around conspiracy. Because everyone I've spoken with lines up this timeline of a 10-year conspiracy. And, you know, it also crescendos around the Mar-a-Lago raid. Who was behind the Mar-a-Lago raid? What were they looking for? Why would they raid a former president's home? And so, you know, it certainly feels like there could be, you know, reason for a conspiracy charge, but we'll wait on that. We don't know where this is going
What's interesting about that, Maria, is that if you just simply look at, like, the legal theory and framework that Jack Smith brought, it's, okay, just use what they used against us, and how can they complain? So there's no question there was a conspiracy. I don't use that word lightly. There's too many conspiracy theories. No, because you look at the documents we're getting. It starts in 2016 with that Steele dossier, runs through Walter Giardina and Comey and Ray, and Ray, by the way, that guy needs to be held accountable as well, because all that stuff happened on his watch. And I was in prison with a lot of guys on RICO charges who got charged because they should have known. The feds will know what I'm talking about there. Let's get to the bottom of this. Maria, you've done a great job, just a beautiful job keeping this in the public's eye. And when this all started, they laughed at us. But now we know from all these documents, it's just too true.
Very serious
and it can't
stuff.
happen here in America, Maria.
And that's why we've kept on it. It's very serious. We're going to stick to our principles here. But let me move on and ask you about trade, since you're with us this morning, Peter, because President Trump welcomed Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday to the White House. They talked about trade, tariffs, and foreign policy. Watch this.
We want Canada to do great, but you know, there's a point at which we also want the same business. We're competing for the same business. That's the problem.
There are areas where we compete, and it's in those areas where we have to come to an agreement that works. But there are more areas where we are stronger together, and that's what we're focused on. And we're going to get the right deal.
So Jamieson Greer told me last week that they're going to look at these bilaterally. You're going to look at Canada and the U.S. trade. You're going to look at Mexico and U.S. trade, not USMCA, which was a three-country deal. Can you tell us anything about that, Peter, and your reaction to the meeting yesterday?
Sure. we are just broadly in the most beautiful place for the American people we've been, I think, ever with respect to trade. We're engaged. President Trump is engineering a fundamental restructuring of the international trade environment so that we are no longer penalized by the rules of the World Trade Organization, which fundamentally skew against us. That's the big picture. What the Jameson Greer, Howard Lednick, Scott Bessent, myself behind the scenes are doing is using a template with every specific country that deals, we look at, what's the tariffs that we're getting screwed with. In Canada, it's like things like lumber and dairy. What's the non-tariff barriers that countries erect so that we can't sell into their markets? What's the currency situation look like? And then there's like national security issues. How can they help us shore up our supply chains and the things we need to survive? So that's how we're approaching it bilaterally. That's where we're strongest from a negotiating point of view. And this is delivering. I mean, you look at the trade deals we have, it's just, Europe. From Europe to the Philippines, Indonesia, Japan, Vietnam. I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
so trusting Trump on trade.
We're waiting for the president's meeting with Xi Jinping, expected at the end of the month, on the sidelines to discuss more on the China potential deal. Peter, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much.
You take care of yourself, Maria.
And to you, Peter Navarro.